Hello, Stacy.
Hi, Marina. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Excited
Good.
to chat.
Good. And hello, everyone who is watching. And we will continue our dialogues that we have started last month, I believe, right? And we are recording this every week. And last week we were talking about hard times, which is very appropriate right now. We're still in the middle of pandemic, and the external conditions are affecting us inevitably. And I also was sick last time, so it was difficult for me in terms of low energy level. And we talked about how to be when the conditions outside, or when you are sick, or when other external circumstances are present, and how to deal with them and not to make them worse. And today we decided to talk about something that we all encounter, is when the conditions are okay, when conditions are not in our way, but we ourselves are. And I think we all can relate to it. I can't imagine anybody alive who have never encountered inner barriers, inner enemies, if you will. So let's talk about it.
When we were talking about what to discuss today, I responded with Marina's idea with I'm a professional at this. When everything externally seems to be just fine and okay and nothing's collapsing, yet there are a million issues and problems and ways that I sabotage myself. So I'm a professional in this category.
And I think I responded, welcome to the club. Are you a human being by any chance? So let's contemplate it. Let's contemplate what is this that actually stands in the way when everything seems, in terms of the conditions, are okay, working for us, but still we set a goal and we self-sabotage. Or sometimes we feel very low energy in terms of being sad or being irritated, or actually I think irritation, it's higher energy, but still unpleasant. We feel unpleasant inside. And I thought that we cannot probably discuss this topic properly if we do not bring the phenomenon that we all are using, but not many of us are actually knowing what it is, and it's our ego. So let's talk about our ego, what ego is, what it does for us, and how we can deal with it. Should we try to transcend it, as some people recommend? Should we befriend it? Should we fight it? So are you open to this, Stacy?
Yes. I want to stay connected to why we sabotage ourselves and where the ego connects that.
Yes, we will contemplate this, because self-sabotage is so common, and I think we all experienced it. Some experience it all the time, other people just at times, but we all know firsthand how it feels when we sabotage ourselves. But since I brought this phenomenon of ego, when you hear ego, what comes to mind? What do you think about when someone is telling, oh, it's his or her ego?
For me, I immediately have a negative connotation with the word. And I think ego is probably the biggest element in my life where I personally sabotage myself, because of my negative connotation to it. It stops me and prevents me from stepping fully into my life and the positions that I want to play and the roles that I want to play in my life. And I look at other people, whether famous or within my life, that I think have large egos and want to be nothing like them, and don't want to be a show off, and don't want to be grandiose, and don't want to, brag about my life or what I've done. And so I run as far in the other direction. But I also know that I'm a human and I need my ego. and an ego can help in creative endeavors and help me get to the places I want to be in my life. So I haven't found the balance.
Well, first, I'm very glad that you brought up the both sides of the ego. That yes, in our culture, it is usually used with negative connotation, which is mind-boggling for me, because this culture is based on ego. It's based on competition. It's based on production, and it's based on focusing on individuality rather than, it's an individual culture. It's not a collectivism culture like many Eastern cultures. It's a Western culture that is based on individuality, protecting individuality, protecting individual property, individual intellectual property. So the culture is built on ego, yet it uses it with negative connotation, and mostly with negative connotation. And I believe that this goes back to the religious roots of understanding ego. And in most religious doctrines, the goal is to transcend ego. The goal is to love everyone and to feel one with everyone and everything, and with God and with universe. So I believe that particularly Judeo-Christian doctrine, but also in Buddhism and Hinduism, ego is considered a bad guy that we need to transcend. However, in psychology, and this is something that when I started contemplating the ego phenomenon, I was so interested that in West, with psychology was born in the West as a science. Of course, the roots of it go back to the philosophy thousands and thousands years ago, and but in psychology, the goal is actually to strengthen the ego, and to have a healthy ego. And I like how you said, I do need ego. We do need ego. But what is it, healthy ego versus unhealthy ego? This is, I think, what we need to talk about. And if you think of healthy and unhealthy ego, what comes to mind?
Well, I think we are both using our egos in this conversation and this video series in putting this out into the world. And for me, if I reflect on our conversations and the work that we're doing and the work that we want to do in the world, we want to help people and provide people tools and experiences and conversations that will encourage them to look at their own lives in different ways and in different perspectives. So the healthy side of the ego is with both of us today, I would like to think.
Well said. Well said. I really hope so. And well, I know so. I agree with you completely. So what we actually do is we use, what is ego? Let's just define it. It actually a characteristic of the mind that protects our individual existence. So it's rooted deep in the history of the development of species on the planet Earth. In order for amoeba to survive, you would need to survive as an individual. And then when hundreds and millions of individual amoeba survive, then the entire family, the entire species of amoeba survive. So we are no different. And ego really protects our individual existence, both in this body, so it's protecting our body, and also protecting our social statuses in the community and in the society. And this is it. Ego only cares about our individual survival, both physical and social. And when it is healthy, it only works for how can we speak our authentic truth. And this is what we're doing. We are serving people, but we are doing it using our individual knowledge, time, expertise, willingness to do this. But it's our individual minds that right now we collaborate on that. So your individual mind and my individual mind have the same purpose, the same goal, and we collaborate on this. It's indeed a very healthy way of using our ego. So we are, and without our individual existence, we wouldn't be able to do it, right? And that is why number one goal that, or number one role that our ego plays is protecting our individual existence, and at the same time doing our thing in life, serving or learning or communicating with others. So this is one of the things that is important to know. Another thing that is important to contemplate, the limitations of ego. And instead of just really discarded it altogether, which is impossible, as long as we live in the body, we need ego. But I would like to call it befriending it. So knowing it, knowing its strengths and limitations, and when it takes the best of us because of its limitations, be aware of it. So let's contemplate some limitations of ego. What is it that ego cannot do? So we said it can protect our individual existence and can put on us in a certain role and play our role as an individual. But what it cannot do, from the top of your head?
Listen to others.
Well, yes, it can, only as long as it serves its own purposes.
Connect each other.
Pardon me?
Connect each other.
Connecting you said the word love.
Mm-hmm.
And when we're talking about romantic love, it's ego against ego most of the time. But when we are talking about unconditional love that comes from the heart, this is where ego is completely not useful, because as we talked before, love is this substance, if you will, like sodium or like lead or like ferrum, any element that cannot be individual. It's just a substance that we can connect to. We have it in our being, in our body, in our being, but we cannot, it doesn't divide us, it connects us. So beautifully said. Anything else that comes to mind that ego cannot do?
Like be creative, or like have inspiration and I don't know, intuitive hints or guidance or creativity.
Very, very, very beautifully said. And I completely agree with this. Ego, it can be creative, again, within competition. Mm-hmm. I can create as me, but I will compete with what I create. But as a group, it doesn't know what to do, because do I protect myself or do I protect the group? By the way, this is something that we need to talk about also, that ego sometimes expands not only to me, but to us. It's me, my family, my people, my nation. But what ego cannot do is include all of us. So we can be proud as an individual, it's our ego at work. Proud as a part of a family, if it's a famous family. Proud as a part of a nation or race, or any group that we can be proud of, be part of the group. But we cannot be proud to be alive. You see, whenever we're talking about the bigger picture, and if we're talking about creativity, just expressing my love, expressing my authentic self, then ego cannot help us. So it can only kind of keep us inside a group and protect us inside this group, but it cannot be universal, at least the way I understand it. When I was saying this, what was going on in your mind?
I'm curious to know what role our ego plays. How do we become aware enough to decide when our ego is helping or hurting us? And in
Very
the
good
context
question.
of when our world is fine and the external world is not crumbling around us, yet our ego is either hurting or helping us. How do we tell?
It's a very good question, and probably it is difficult to give a clear-cut answer, but I will try to at least give some hints. First of all, we need to be aware of ego defenses. We have this, first of all, we play with these words, ego. We use egotist. He is an egotist, or she is so ego-driven. And by the way, sometimes when he or she is an egotist, it's used with negative connotation, but he or she is ego-driven, sometimes be used with a positive connotation, depending on the context. And also we use the word defensive. Oh, he or she is so defensive. And usually we use it with negative connotation. But what is being defensive? Actually, it's very connected with the ego phenomenon, and it was Freud, the first in the history, as far as I know, of psychology, who introduced the idea of ego defenses. Then it was actually an entire branch of psychology called ego psychology emerged, and Anna Freud, Freud's daughter, was one of the leading researchers who explored ego defenses. And we know them, but we use them, but the most difficult part is to recognize them in ourselves, because the main idea of ego defense is that it's unconscious. So I really like how you said, how can we be aware? And there is such idea as maturation of defenses, which means ego psychologist listed all the defenses from the most detrimental, immature, to the least detrimental, the most mature ones. And I'll give you just a few examples, and if there is need for it, we can bring more defenses. But the first one is projection. Why do we project? Why, for example, we think that, oh, this person hates me. Or, for example, this person doesn't know what he says. We project onto others our own insecurities. Wherever we are not confident in whatever area in our life, we cannot accept parts of ourselves that, for whatever reason, usually for cultural reasons, are considered bad. We project them outside, and we're completely unaware of it most of the time. So everybody around us sees us, and we don't. Or hypochondriasis is,
In the projection, can you ask people, for people that want to explore how they project, or when they project, or what they project on, is it possible to ask people close enough to your life that you trust and can hear maybe hurtful or, things about yourself or feedback about yourself? Is it possible to ask for, what do you project on? How do you, when I'm listening to you, I'm curious of what I project?
Yes, of course we can. And what we can use is what you judge the most in others. Mm-hmm. What is it that you cannot stand in others? Is it rudeness or show-offishness or jealousy, or some people are greedy and you cannot stand it? Most likely it is a sign of your projection, because these very qualities you cannot accept in yourself. And pardon me?
Go with me here. When you talk about that, something that comes up is people that are mean. My heart hurts when I see people be mean to others or be vengeful or aggressive. Mm-hmm. What is that telling me?
Well, first of all, aggression, it's always a sign of helplessness. Mm-hmm. They don't have tools to communicate in different ways. Most likely they didn't have the chance to learn these tools. Most likely these people are from very troubled families, and doesn't necessarily aggressive families, by the way. Sometimes family can be withdrawn. They just didn't know how to share love and how to share presence with their children. And children who grow up in these families, either very violent families or very withdrawn families, they do not have the tools of self-expression. Actually, aggression is just the form of self-expression. When a tiny child is very frustrated and cannot speak yet, What children, like toddlers, when they cannot speak, what they do, they either fall on the floor and start kicking and screaming and throw a temper tantrum. Some of them bite, some of them spit. These all are signs of not knowing what to do, how to express my pain. I feel pain inside, how do I express it? And people, adult people who are very aggressive and rude, this is the expression of their inner pain that they didn't learn to express in a different way.
And so I wouldn't look at myself as an aggressive person or rude person. So, but rudeness really triggers me.
And this is, in my understanding, because all of us, every human being has all the spectrum of expression, from the rudest to the most kind and compassionate. The spectrum, I call it, we have Hitler and Mother Teresa in us and everything in between. And it's only depending on our upbringing and the way we work on ourselves as adults, what comes more, Mother Teresa or Hitler or Gandhi or some other archetypes of tyrants that come out. And that is why when you are triggered by a rude person, it means you cannot accept Hitler in yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Like
I can be rude and I need to accept that.
Yes, yes, and at times you are.
Yeah.
You may be not as rude as the person who triggered you, mm-hmm. and you may not be rude as often as he or she is, but you can be. And I believe with no matter how good we are, and most people want to be good. We really want to be good from the depths of our heart. But then all these barriers that primarily are ego-driven, we want to protect our identity, want to protect our physical survival, our social survival. We compete. This is another ego at work, competition. Cooperation needs to, in order to cooperate, we need to put our ego next to never give it a driver's seat. Just befriend it again, know it, befriend it, recognize its tricks and recognize its defenses, and really knowing when ego is at work.
I think it's so powerful just to pause there of really reflecting on our lives and what we can't accept in ourselves. And I'm sure it's very hard for a lot of people to accept them being rude or mean or angry or bossy or whatever it may be. And it's not what I'm hearing, and what I understand is it's not necessarily fighting it, but just accepting it and seeing it in yourself.
Exactly. And it's not fighting it, because the more actually our in acceptance of our ego and hatred toward our ego is our ego's most delicious food. Mm-hmm. Just think of it.
Instead of trying to avoid being rude, it's just accepting that lives inside of me and being aware of when it comes up, but yes, not overcompensating to be nicer or to be more whatever.
Very well said. Very well said. Because when you're overcompensating by being nicer in the situation when you don't want to be nice, it will backfire somewhere. Because last time we were talking about when we say yes, when we mean no, it's being over nice because we don't want to be perceived as rude, angry, or jealous, or any other negative quality that we can think about. We want to be perceived as good people. And that is why very often we really are dishonest with ourselves, overcompensating for our ego at work.
Yeah.
And I agree with you. You said a very important thing that I would like to emphasize, that it's actually with many of my clients, what I observed is that when the people first encounter the idea that whatever they hate in others, they have in themselves. And by the way, there's a huge work in psychology called shadow work that addresses exactly this. What we cannot accept in ourselves, we project onto others and then hated in others. So if someone is interested in looking at this more thoroughly, just explore different work of Debbie Ford, Deepak Chopra. Many authors were talking about shadow work, and I think you can learn a lot of it in details. But when people first encounter this idea, they are flabbergasted. Sometimes they are kicking and screaming, saying, no, there is no rude person in me, or no, I'm such a generous person. I'm not greedy at all. And this is the sign that they cannot accept these seeds of greediness or the seeds of rudeness, or sometimes even cruelty in themselves. And the seeds are there. And under certain circumstances, we all can be rude, jealous, angry. And angry, I wouldn't use it because it's a feeling that covers many other feelings, but sometimes even cruel, which for me, cruelty is the most difficult human quality to accept, which tells a lot about me not being able to accept my own cruelty. And have I been cruel? Perhaps not physically, but emotionally and psychologically, I have. If I really go deep into all of my relationships, I will be able to see when I was cruel, when I was saying the word that I knew will be hurting another person. It means being cruel. So when people just for the first time see it, it's hard to admit, because the defenses of the ego. And let me just explain a little bit more about it. What ego does, it psychologically protects us from awarenesses that we are not able to process yet. So to be aware that you can be a rude and angry and jealous and callous and greedy person. For some people who really work their entire life in being good, it can destroy their entire self-concept. So ego protects us from destroying of our self-concepts. And that is why these layers of awareness need to go very slowly, layer by layer. Because if we try to rip too much of defenses from a person who is so insecure inside, it may hurt him or her more than it would help. And that is why defenses range from immature, like projection, denial, hypochondriasis, when people cannot process their emotional problems, they become sick physically. No physician can find anything wrong with them. All tests come negative, but they feel pain all over their body, or they feel low energy. This is a typical case of hypochondriasis, when people process it on the level of the body, process psychological stress on the level of the body. So, and for example, the more mature defenses are humor. And when I learned this for the first time, I was so surprised, because I thought humor and defense of the ego has nothing to do with each other. But humor is a defense. Because if you think about it, when we laugh, when we joke, when we cannot accept something as it is, but joking about it makes it softer. We still reject this. We still cannot fully accept it, but instead of being like very rejecting something in ourselves or others, we joke about it. So it's a very mature, very soft defense, if you will.
Yeah, I think we all know and have used humor to alleviate a stress in a situation or conflict.
Yes, soften the stress, soften it. I really believe it's more of a making it more digestible. And these are what defenses do. They make whatever we are aware of it more digestible for us. And if we cannot process it, then we put a defense. I actually use a metaphor myself that ego defenses serve as milk teeth. And until milk teeth, like babies and toddlers have milk teeth, that they process food until the adult teeth come out. So it's a temporary mechanism that allows us to deal with life until we can accept life and ourselves fully and completely. So this, I don't know what the pivotal point, or this is the final goal, is to accept ourselves, everybody else, and life as it is completely. Of course, it is more theoretical than practical, but then we wouldn't need ego and ego defenses.
Right.
So when I said this, did it sound too theoretical for you? Did it sound more like wanting to apply it to real life? Because this is what you usually challenge me. That whatever I say, it's too theoretical. You are philosophizing. So let's try to apply it to real life situation.
Well, I did. And that's where I kind of stopped you in saying, if I can't accept being rude or being mean, what does that say about me? So I feel really good and clear. And I would say for those listening, shadow work has been some of the most transformational work in my life. And if we look at what we do to sabotage ourselves or to hold us back and to kind of be our own worst enemy, this is a phenomenal place to start, of just looking at what we're reactive to in our lives and where we do use humor, or what behaviors or actions in others bother us. It is one of the most profound tools.
And by the way, intellectualization, it's one of the defenses of the ego. So when I philosophize, and I do tend to philosophize, I protect myself from going deeper into my heart. And instead of applying whatever it is that I learn to put it into practice, I defended it with philosophizing. And there is a defense of intellectualization instead of addressing our painful experiences and really opening up. We intellectualize. We create theories behind every feeling. We create theory behind every experience instead of saying it hurts like hell. And I need to allow it to hurt. And because one of the ways of stripping the layers of ego defenses is just staying in the pain. Yes, it hurts. It hurts my ego. It means it hurts the sense of my individual identity as a human being, both physical and emotional identity and social, like face that we put out there into the world. When it's hurt, when it's put into jeopardy, we are in pain. So intellectualization is one of them. And another one that is flabbergasting is reaction formation. Is, for example, when we cannot accept parts of our sexuality, we go and protest abortions, for example, and put the parts of, or premarital sex. We would become very active in the areas that we cannot, in the areas of life that we cannot accept in ourselves. So reaction formation. Instead of accepting our sexuality, we start scorning people who engage in extramarital activity, or we would put the tracks. What was, once I saw it and was so difficult for me to see the parts of the babies on the track, and it was anti-abortion track, and I still have goosebumps when I recall it. So you can put this very disturbing pictures, and actually most people don't understand that they are protecting something that they cannot accept in themselves and in life in general. Mm-hmm. Without going political about it, I don't want to say whether it's right or wrong. I'm talking about the psychological defenses. Why some people would do it, other people would never do it, because if they accept their sexuality and they accept life in all of its expressions, they probably wouldn't do it. Mm-hmm. I believe. So our ego can be very tricky. But let's go back to what we started with, self-sabotage, because it's a huge issue that many of us, most of us, have experienced. So when you think of self-sabotage and think of cases when you sabotaged yourself, what comes to mind? Just from the common sense perspective, why do we do it? It's so counterintuitive.
What I think of is when we think of, we're conditioned to, someone could tell us 10 amazing things about ourselves and one terrible thing about ourselves. We focus on the one terrible thing, and how we started, and why we can't live in joy and be happy, even like when our external circumstances are there and fine. Why do we find unrest? It's almost like maybe we're programmed to, not programmed, maybe we're
Conditioned
to have a problem, to like be more comfortable in pain and suffering than joy and happiness, which is crazy.
But this is the fact. And I like how passionate you were when you said it. It is indeed crazy, but it is the fact of life for most people. And I think it goes back, the roots go deeply into our inability to accept ourselves. Perhaps this entire idea of the original sin, that even people who are not religious, they will live in this culture that is permeated with the idea of the original sin, that something's fundamentally wrong with us. That, as you gave the example, 10 good things, one bad things, will focus on this bad thing because we were conditioned to not accept ourselves for who we are, and for constantly we're constantly becoming something. We cannot be at peace with who we are, with ourselves as we are here and now. And I think it's even promoted in our society. We have to constantly work on ourselves, become something. It's the same thing as the original sin. Something's wrong with us and we need to be better. So yes, we are conditioned to feel it. And with our brain, this is something I wanted to talk about a little bit, that our brain is an amazing, amazing machine. Yet, it likes to work in patterns. And yet, it is rather lazy. It likes to continuity. So all addictions and all healthy habits that we have, both healthy and unhealthy, are based on this quality of the brain or tendency of the brain. Whatever we do repetitively becomes our second nature. If this something happens to be a healthy thing, like brushing our teeth, taking showers every day, we cannot not do it, and it's a healthy habit. But if, for example, it's a addiction, if we tend to addiction to alcohol, addiction to certain unhealthy behavior, unhealthy eating, sex addiction, all this is based on the same ability of the brain to, not ability, but tendency of the brain to go over and over toward repetitive behavior, then the more we do it, the more difficult it is for us to start the new behavior. And that is why I usually say, don't try to fight unhealthy habits. It's almost impossible to kill a habit. What you can do, on the other hand, is start developing a healthy habit and do more and more parallel to this unhealthy one, do more and more healthy habit. And then this one will die in its own because you don't reinforce it. Eventually it will die. So don't even bother killing your unhealthy habits. And with this self-sabotage, I believe that the nature of it is that this very, like, by millennia conditioned idea that something's wrong with us, it's deep inability to accept ourselves, and we just project it onto our behavior.
I think that of accept ourselves, but want to change. I think I want to just pause on what you just said of like not trying to change what we perceive to be unhealthy habits, but build new ones around it.
Not around, parallel to it.
Parallel to
it. Yeah.
We always want
around.
The conditioning is wanting to be different or be better or change versus accept what is right now and build. Yes. And I think that's so profound in not fighting where we are.
Exactly, exactly. And I believe that self-sabotage is a continuation of fighting where we are, just if self-hatred and self-loathing is an inner, it's an emotional part. Sabotage is doing the same, but on the behavioral level. So we really want to be successful, but we self-sabotage. It's counterintuitive. Why do we do it? Because we cannot accept ourselves for who we are, because we fight ourselves for who we are. And self-sabotaging is continuation of the fight on the behavioral level. So we don't do what is good for us because we don't deserve it. Unconsciously, we believe we don't deserve good life, good developing healthy habits, being successful.
Well, okay, how do you begin to consciously rewire that programming?
First of all, we always start with a moment of awareness. If we tell ourselves that we self-sabotage right now, okay, I needed to do this assignment by that time, or I promised someone to do this by this time, and I can do anything. I'll clean my home, I'll do the dishes, I'll do anything but attending to this. You see, you're laughing. We all know it because we've all been there. And then instead of attending to this task, unconsciously we are protesting doing this task.
Yeah.
Because if I will complete this task by a certain time, it means I am good, but unconsciously I'm not good enough. So it will be counterintuitive. It sounds crazy when you start ripping all the layers of defenses around it, but it's truth. It's just
discipline. Like, I don't always have the discipline to do that task that I need to do, but I have the discipline to do everything else in my house.
So you do have discipline then. It's just you choose to use your discipline here, but not there. So people say, oh, I'm not disciplined. Well, there are areas in your life where most people, of course, there are a few examples that people who are not disciplined, period, in any area of their life, then their house would be, or place would be a disarray. They would dress not neatly. They would not wash their hair. They would not. There are people really who are functioning at a level that they need help. They need professional help. But most of us do have discipline for some things, but don't have the discipline for another thing. So it's not about discipline from my perspective. It's about being aware that I am sabotaging myself here. First, it's awareness. Okay. Then, okay, you can even talk to your ego and say, okay, my ego, you are conditioned by millennia of people before me, my ancestors, and that something's fundamentally wrong with me. Let's start there. Okay. Because fighting this is, you see, fighting this wouldn't do you any good. I'm bad, although I want to be good. So let's start there. So I really like the idea of, and I like doing the dishes because at some point doing the dishes, I've been doing dishes my entire life, starting I think at age 3 when my parents had to put some stool in order for me to reach the sink with dishes. But it's been so dishes is interesting. We're not going there now, but what I'm talking about dishes, you first need to start with the first plate. If your sink is full of dishes, there is no other way than to start with the first plate. So you play with your mind and say, okay, I will not complete the entire task today, but I will attend to this task every day, and I'll spend 5 minutes or 10 minutes on this task every day. So you do one dish at a time. This is one of the ways of doing it, and doing it with humor, because as I said, humor is a defense, but it's a mature defense of the ego. So, all right, we'll start playing with this task. Who's going to win? My self-sabotage or my humor, let's say. And when you soften it with humor, first of all, you don't hate your self-sabotage as much. And then the play has begun.
I love that.
This is probably the softest, the least inhumane way of addressing your problems. And with addictions, I'm not that familiar with addictions. I don't work with people with addictions. I actually see clients with addictions who also see some addiction counselors. So I just would like to let you know that I'm not a specialist in this. But in my perspective, if you just tell yourself, if it's, for example, a drinking problem, alcoholism, I'm not going to drink only right now. I'm not going to drink only today. And then building on that. Of course, 12-step programs, they work for many people, not all people, but many people. And if we're talking about a self-sabotage in unhealthy habits, for example, overeating, for example. Some people eat, it's called nervous eating. When they're nervous, they start eating. It's just not right now. Maybe in next moment, but not right now. Right now, I'm not snacking.
I have another example of that, because eating what came to mind as an example in my life of going back to the habits and not fighting the habits in your life that you perceive as bad, and trying to build new ones alongside it. And when I was in a period of my life where I was constantly working, constantly stressed and overwhelmed, and had very, very little awareness of myself and those around me, I would turn to food as a reward, as a pleasure, and especially sugar. Sugar was like a very strong vice in my world during this time. And I share this in that it wasn't that I built a new habit to eat vegetables alongside my craving for sugar. It was really trying new things. So when I started going to therapy and having conversations and becoming more aware of myself and awakening to more parts of myself, the vice of sugar and the grip of sugar or food in my life became less strong. So there is also something about not having to match a bad habit with the good habit, the other side of the good habit, but opening up and being curious to other parts of your life that you're being drawn to that may eventually help ease and soften everything.
It's very beautiful, very beautifully said. And thank you for bringing your example. So let me clarify it. So you said you started eating vegetables parallel to sugar. Is that accurate?
No.
Oh, no. Oh, what is it?
That's not the answer. That wasn't the answer for me. The answer for me was allowing myself to be pulled in other directions in my life that I was curious about.
Okay, so what you said is switching the focus.
Yeah.
Switching the focus, and because when you have an addiction, the focus is there. Most of your focus is there. So what you are suggesting, which I completely support and completely agree with, is expanding your horizons. What is it that you are interested in? What are your hobbies? What are your heart desires? And really just taking more space and expanding the interest so that focus is not so predetermined. And again, if the thought of wanting to eat something sweet or wanting to drink or wanting to engage in unhealthy behavior, whatever it is, you just expand this focus from this to some other areas. If you don't mind sharing what worked for you, what other areas that did you explore then, if you don't mind sharing?
Honestly, it was therapy. It was learning more about myself and having someone to talk to and to listen to and make sense of what was in my mind and brain. And I never shared so openly in my life with anyone. And it was just this complete release of,
Then what you are talking about right now, it's a little bit different than I initially understood. So when I understood exploring more areas, it's more hobby-like, interest-like. But what you are talking is actually, it's so important, is that you became more honest with yourself. In therapy, with talking and ripping these layers of facade, it brings us back into ego defenses. Ego defenses help us keep this facade with which we present ourselves to the world. I'm a nice, successful person, but inside I am so vulnerable. And actually, when we show this, when we are not afraid and take risk of showing this vulnerability to other people, especially in the safe environments, it's just amazing how the facade is not needed anymore. We don't need to.
I let's put it this way. It's like trying to help my addiction or vice with sugar and food in this time of my life with eating vegetables, or trying to control like another habit or build another habit alongside it, for me was like taking a knife to a gunfight. However, because in that time too, I was struggling with stress. I had to sign up for a marathon to be motivated to move my body. I had to go to the extreme in a lot of areas of my life to motivate myself to work out, to be healthy, whatever it may be. And I think in addressing a bigger picture, or being able to kind of start to unpeel the layers, instead of just building another habit alongside it. And the habit that I built was therapy, and was opening my heart and having deeper conversations, was so much more powerful and lasting. And yeah.
It's amazing what you just said, Stacy. You said that going to therapy and opening up is actually a healthy habit. And I've never thought of it as a habit, but when you said it, it makes sense. It's a habit of peeling the layers of defenses, the layers of facade, so that you are not afraid to be vulnerable when the situation permits. You're not afraid to open up. You're not afraid to see and sometimes show, again, not to everyone, but when the situation is appropriate for that, your shadow side, showing all assets and aspects of yourself, not only the beautiful and attractive ones that we like hold as a facade to the world. Here am I, I'm such and such, I'm so good and kind and educated and wonderful, I'm here to serve. And and by the way, what comes to mind when Anna Freud was asked, and she actually was taking care of her father, Sigmund Freud, for the last part of his life, and she never married, she didn't have her own family, so she really gave herself to serving him, serving other people. And when she was asked about altruism, which actually another defense, mature, but defense of the ego nevertheless, she was asked, but altruism is done from the goodness of the heart. And she said, altruism is done from the badness of the heart that really wants to be good. And I even have goosebumps. So when we are altruistic, also it's a healthy habit, like humor, but it's a defense, because when we are helping others, somewhere inside we're not satisfied with the world and with these people the way they are,
or ourselves.
Oh, ourselves, exactly. We don't with them because of ourselves, because ourselves always is the source of dissatisfaction, and then it is projected onto the world or onto others. So also when I learned when the humor and altruism were defense mechanisms of the ego, I was so surprised. But now it makes perfect sense, because it's still not being accepted ourselves, others in the world as we are.
So we've talked about such powerful tools and practices and concepts. What is the first step in breaking the conditioning of sabotage, or letting our ego control or run our life?
I believe it will be different for different people. And actually both humor and altruism work, doing something for others, take some attention off you, your beloved self, or actually hated self for the most part. But beloved, it's like a label for it, means my all attention goes to me. By the way, those people who in conversations pull the blanket of attention constantly toward themselves, who brag, who want to speak more in the group, who want to all the intention to be on them, as are actually very insecure people. Because for a person who is at peace with him or herself, they don't need any external recognition of their goodness. They usually are quiet. You usually in the group, you won't even notice them because they don't show off. So showing off and all this gregarious persona is always deep insecurity, and covers deep insecurity inside. And that is why I believe, instead of just hoping for all these defenses to fall, it's not very realistic, but using whatever is more natural for you. If it's humor, then soften it with humor. Okay, I'm self-sabotaging again. How can I do my first dish today? Or altruism, helping others. And if this is your journey, use it. Helping others takes, again, attention and too much preoccupation with yourselves. So any step, I believe, to take toward, first, I don't know if I mentioned this, but first acknowledging this, acknowledging, being aware of, okay, I'm self-sabotaging, or I tend to brag, or I tend to be ill all the time, even though no doctors can ever discover what's wrong with me, or I tend to philosophize and intellectualize. Probably there is something inside that I don't accept, and probably it is shown in my behavior when I sabotage something. So how can I start with softening your defenses with humor and altruism, and doing one small piece of that which you sabotage at a time? Frankly, at this point, this sounds the most realistic and the least cruel to yourself, because some people do some cruel, drastic changes, and usually they cannot last. So they start going to a gym, for example, and go for a week and then drop it, or they start meditating and doing it for a week and they drop it. So for most people, drastic changes not work, but small steps work better.
Beautiful. I think the acknowledging and becoming aware is the biggest step that we can take today, of just becoming aware of our lives, more aware of our lives and our reactions and what we need.
Yes. And since you brought up reactions, also observing your reactions, your reactivity. When you're snapping at someone, it's a sign of lack of peace. When you are jealous of someone, it's a sign of you not being satisfied with your life and yourself as you are. Any negative reaction, you name it, fear, anxiety, jealousy, envy, greed, whatever it is, it's always a sign that there is no peace inside. And so if you catch yourself feeling these feelings are, our emotions have astonishing power to show us where we are not at peace and where we are not at peace with ourselves and the world.
Well, yeah. Any parting words? It was a great conversation.
Let's just put our hand on our heart and let's do this. I really like it. It's called metta meditation or loving kindness meditation. I think it would be a good way to close our dialogue today. Just close your eyes and mentally repeat, may I be healthy. May I be happy. May I be at peace. May I be free of suffering and the roots of suffering. May I be free. And then think of a person, one person who you love and whom you wish something good, something from the depths of your heart. And thinking of this person, say, may he or she be healthy. May he or she be happy. May he or she be at peace. May he or she be free of suffering and the roots of suffering. May he or she be free. And now think of a group of people who you want to wish well and who you care about. And repeat silently after me. May they be healthy. May they be happy. May they be at peace. May they be free of suffering and the roots of suffering. May they be free. And now think of a person who you don't like, who you have difficult relationships with. And repeat the same words, addressing it to him or her. May this person be healthy. May this person be happy. May this person be free of suffering and the roots of suffering. May this person be at peace. May this person be free. And now think of all the humanity, every human being who lives on this earth, and expand these words to all humans, repeating after me silently. May we all be healthy. May we all be happy. May we all be at peace. May we all be free of suffering and the roots of suffering. May we all be free. And now expand it even further to all living creatures. And repeat again silently after me. May all sentient beings be healthy. May all sentient beings be happy. May all sentient beings be at peace. May all sentient beings be free of suffering and the roots of suffering. May all sentient beings be free. And so be it, and so it is. And now you can feel feet on the floor, the chair on which you're sitting. Come back fully into here and now. And when you feel comfortable, you may open your eyes.
What a wonderful way to wrap up this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. I love you.
I love you. Thank you so much for listening. And if anything today sparked your interest or you have questions, feel free to get in touch. And we look forward to many more conversations. Thank you.